Let me start my counter, and I'll try to be brief to make up for lost time. My name is Jonathan. Thank you for the kind introduction, and also for letting me be part of this fantastic panel. I'm very interested to hear more from the previous speakers about common areas of interest, for example, around search. I'll try to give you an insight into how I've been trying to rebuild the software we've been using since quite a lot of time, and even way before I joined these projects. So what I'm presenting here is very much my own work in progress project. As you may see from the outline already, all of this was done in the intent of becoming more sustainable in what we do. Both economically, but also especially ecologically, in the sense of we've had a previous software, it wasn't working particularly well, it used a lot of resources, and we were thinking about how could we be better at this. Bit of background about me for an international audience. German academies, which is one of the ones I'm working for, German academies conduct humanities and social sciences projects. They usually have very long funding periods of at least 12 years. A lot of our projects have like around 25 years of funding, which also means we need software where we are positive that we can keep it working for at least that period of time. Our projects include lots of editions, other cultural heritage projects, and in Germany, websites produced with public money, in theory, are also obliged to be privacy preserving and accessible. So this is something we already have to work with, but don't often observe. And the Academy in Mainz also coordinates NFDI for Culture, which is a research infrastructure provider, where you might find some of the requirements for the software coming from this particular background of interconnecting data sets. All right, cultural heritage data for us includes dictionaries, it includes object databases, image databases, but also music, and various other types of immaterial cultural heritage. One common feature is that they all have relations to people, locations, events, and all of this data needs to be created, managed, and published. So what I'm showing here is a software to try and do it all. You can have different feelings and thoughts about this. For us to be ecologically sensitive, it makes sense to reduce the software we have as much as possible. And still make it work for all these contexts. One of the reasons why all of these are put together on the same slide is that, for example, one of the projects funding this, Corpus Vitrearum stained glass project, originally collected images, now it needs object data, has a lot of location and person data, but now might also have another edition focusing on letters. So we need software that is very versatile for these kinds of projects, as I said, with long funding periods. I'll skip most of this, but we have the previous version of the software and it suffers from the same difficulties as a lot of software. We're not enough people to keep everything working together because it was never built as one organic group of software components, just different projects adding a component, then adding a variant of the same component, and now pretty much everything's old, and we have a lot of trouble updating all the various projects we've had and we still have at the Academy. So what was our methodology in trying to rebuild this software? What you see in the top left is an original vision for this software stack that I'm talking about. It never materialized in the way it was put together here. But one of the main, first things we did was, are there any others, to look at the question, are there any other software solutions we could use and contribute to that would fill the gap for us instead of developing or redeveloping our own software. So we looked at stuff like Whiskey, Kitodo, both are based around content management systems like the original software we were using. We looked at Wikibase, we looked at In the bottom right, you see everything organized around exist XML databases, but also Omeka and Lexonomy. A lot of these focus on one particular type of data or a very limited set of types of data. So we ended up considering rewriting the software we already had. To get new energy into this, I looked at media ecology as inspiration. For those who don't know, media ecology tries to find out what roles media force us to play, how media structure what we are seeing or thinking, and why media make us feel and act as we do. Ecology is the scientific study on organisms and their interactions with the environment. In this context, an ecological approach focuses on the distributions, abundances, and relations between organic and non-organic beings in an ecosystem. So what this approach does is try to think of a software for the cultural heritage domain as something that needs to live in various different ecologies and be successful in these ecologies. And one thing that was quite interesting to see very early on was that it changes our perception of what we do to prepare such a project. Instead of just looking at user stories, for example, I took more a liking to look at various communities that were already using the websites we produce and what their needs are from us, instead of like having this idealized user in mind. Another example around here is instead of looking at how can everyone reuse the component I'm building, we're now more looking at what component can we actually get rid of and replace by something that's smaller, more nimble, and more integrated into what we want to do. And the primary question is, how can we build a resilient technology and data flow with all of this? So before I go into aspects like coherence and accessibility, the result of the methodology was actually an analysis of various ecosystems, and you see them here. I'm not going to go into all details. The slides are available online. There's also a recorded version of the talk available. And please contact me if you have any questions. But what struck me as quite interesting when I put this together is that accessibility arose as a very dominant need for what we're doing and for the software we're developing. And also, for example, that we needed to take into account bad faith actors. Those of you who work with servers a lot may know that there's a lot of AI company crawlers on public websites. And they very much block access to a lot of stuff. They make everything slow, and they don't look at stuff strategically. They just harvest and harvest and harvest again what they've already ingested before. And they don't look at like the rules server established for their usage. So these are all different ecologies that I started to think about when putting this together. And at the end of that design process, a number of consequences arose that I took for the development of that software. So we started with the analysis of digital ecosystems, came to the conclusion that we needed a web app, like more relational database behind it, but also enabled for graph-based usage or RDF-based usage, if that rings a bell to someone. It needed to be multilingual. We were open to PHP or Python as the basic language, and now we also have a Rust component in the system. The entire thing is built around one coherent and semantic data model, and the idea is that one fits all. That's, of course, problematic because I designed the data model, so I tell others what the data model will look like and should look like. But in the end, it makes it easier to produce all the various serializations and formats that we need to survive in the various ecosystems. I can talk about this during the discussion, I'm sure. I also took note of the so-called rule of least power. That means use as little JavaScript as possible to make scraping and harvesting easier. We've heard about the issue in the previous talk already. To use atomic accessible front-end HTML and CSS that's rendered on the server side. To include embedded metadata, also to enable a screen reader, but also another harvester to read the data more easily. And then this is where I am right now, so to speak, to also add visualizations and testing to make sure that in the various ecosystems, including those, for example, with a learning disability, the content we provide, like the data we provide, as well as how we present it, can be successful. And the end, like the goal is a semantic portal with equitable access for all. I'm going to skip this one. So like what it just says is, I try to include everything people need in one neat package, or actually a number of components, which I'm going to show you now. So the overall, like most of the work is done in a PHP container. And then we have a couple of helpers that we use as they are, like a database, a server that we configure, a search component that we reuse, and a graph component. And we're thinking about the machine learning component to use in the future, but that's not set in stone yet. Same question is open for IIIF support. So I ended up with a modular approach. So we have like a base package that everyone needs to use. Everything's based on Typo 3. It's a content management system that includes stuff like user management, but also multilingual support. You can also very neatly organize files in there and add volumes from other servers and so on and so forth. So it fit our bill. And we have like a base component providing location, states, and actors, which every project around here needs, and a couple of other features. And then you can just pick and mix whatever else you need in your project or in the portal you want to produce. For example, an object model, like an object, like physical objects, or for media support, or for geodata and image maps, for example. I also want to have like a music and a letter component, but the two immediate projects I'm producing this for don't need these two right now. So that's going to come at a later date. And everything is held together by a container. And there's a boilerplate project extension where you put everything you want to override, you want to have different from the standard settings in there. There's also a component that's not dependent on this one to produce quality assurance dashboards and editorial guides and stuff, one for visualizations. And we also want to, like a colleague is actually starting right now, produce a component to add generic APIs that some of these ecologies need. I'm not going to go into these, just very briefly. You can add main classes as much as you want to. There's a basic pattern to them. They are all more or less the same with additions. And there are a couple of support classes. So for every record that you add, you can say this is the same as this and that authority URL, for example. There's tags to structure everything and relations to model more complex relations between these records. And everything's held together by a resource, like an object resource, for example. For everything, there's a documented data model. You see they look relatively similar. Everything in gray is the same feature, and everything in black is unique to that particular element. So we have as little effort as necessary or as possible, also changing things in the future. Again, ask me for details if you're interested in this technicality. To come to my final point, coherence and accessibility. And what you see here is two very different websites, the two projects I'm producing this for right now. And they all are based, like both of them are based on the same software. They have their more or less unique visual style, and yet I can just, as I said, add an object model to the dictionary project, or add a dictionary to the object and image database that you see below here. And everything is focused on also making content accessible to outsiders, having a good search experience, and especially making it accessible to those who may not be like focused on one particular subject. The dictionary project I'm showing here, it's a dictionary of surnames, has a lot of users, of lay people as users, who are just interested in finding out what the name means. And even though it's, of course, an academic project, it's relatively easy to make that accessible to a broader user base. And the same actually goes for the stained glass project down here. So this is my second to last slide. Basically my learnings in terms of producing an accessible web app coming from the digital humanities perspective. I can very much say accessibility is a social challenge more than a technical one. And there are technical solutions, but the challenge is always going to be social, meaning I have to convince everyone that, for example, having a summary in that dictionary scenario, having a brief summary in language that everyone understands is a good thing to have. It's included in the data model, but I can't make it a requirement right now because, of course, the project lead has their own things that they need to focus on with how they put together the data. Other aspects here, full data set downloads help harvesters and users. I can more easily say, I'm going to block you if you're harvesting our website again and again, because if you go here and it's still accessible to you, there's a full download of the data set. Browser APIs are used throughout the entire project. They are much smoother than custom technology. You need to be willing to respond to how you test everything in your browser, on mobile, with a keyboard, using Zotero to automatically get data from the website, and other types of harvesting tests. I mentioned plain language summaries already. For us, the entire project required a custom CSS framework, so CSS as the layout language, so to speak. So that's custom, and the module that can also be used outside that particular software. The conservative front-end technology we used and embedded metadata in particular improves bot access. So the load on the servers isn't as high when we include it, and we get much better search results. And what I still have to do is user and screen reader tests, because that's much harder. I know what to do. I know how to use a screen reader. But I don't know how someone who only uses a screen reader would look at these things, and I still need to acquire a couple of testers when I have a first initial version finished. And a QA dashboard that also highlights what accessibility features the data already includes and which one it doesn't is also to do. That's pretty much it for me. This is a short summary. As I said, all of this is work in progress. Thanks very much for listening to me. Feel free to contact me afterwards or ask questions. That's it.